Hi, Franco Cavaleri, coming to you from Biologic to talk about curcumin. Now, we've been in the curcumin business and research for a long time. You may or may not know that curcumin was a focus of mine in my doctoral studies at the experimental medicine unit in the Faculty of Medicine at UBC. And it is an area of interest for me, as is the inflammatory pathway, or the NF-kappa B signaling pathway, to be more specific. It came to me as something of tremendous interest because of personal trials and tribulation with an autoimmune condition called severe ulcerative colitis. And through various applications and extractions and working with curcumin in the early stages to improve athletic performance, and in particular, enhance recovery from physical workload, I began using curcumin as a bodybuilder. And ultimately, my objective was, if I can improve recovery, reduce inflammation, that soreness that comes after training. Remember, you can be sore during training as lactic acid builds up in the muscles during anaerobic respiration. That's when you're going all out and you're continuing to push out reps. And that burning sensation is caused by lactic acid. But the pain you feel the next day from that training session is a function of the rupturing, the micro tears in the tissue that then need to be repaired. That pain is a result of inflammation. And you need a small input of inflammatory activity to start in process recovery. But what happens over time is, if that inflammation is prolonged, then recovery can be impaired. And my objective as an athlete, and at that time was theoretical, was, hey, let's use curcumin in extremely high doses to instill recovery that's quicker from game to game, or in my case, which was training session to training session, so that I can get more training sessions in that 1 week. And over years of training, my competitors who I'd meet at various contests every year and a half to 2 years, I was hoping that would make a difference. It appeared to make a difference, but it led into me studying curcumin at a micro level. And this seminar that I'm going to deliver here with PowerPoint is going to demonstrate where I went in terms of diving into the extraction of curcumin and then modifying the proportions of the curcuminoids, because people don't realize there are multiple curcuminoids that make up a curcumin extract. And so it's not that simple. This is not a black and white subject matter, but once you get to see this seminar, you'll see what I did and what we have today as an anti-inflammatory agent that works much better than regular curcumin. We're talking about Curcumin BDMC, trademarked and patented at Biologic. Biologic Pharma Medical is the company that manages this curcuminoid technology. And basically, here we are, moving into the seminar, a bit of my credentials here and my personal story, and then boom. So we've got several research papers in the public domain that have been peer-reviewed and published, showing the evolution of our work over several years to identify the pharmacology of each curcuminoid in a curcumin extract. And I'll show you in this series what we did with it. Just know that inflammation is the core chemistry of every single disease. Every disease we deal with, we're treating symptoms of and/or causal factors to correct them. But the chemistry of inflammation underscores or underlies most all disorders, including things you may not think of originally. Dementia is highly entwined in the inflammatory activity in the brain, including depression. More recently, and that's probably even all about 8-9 years ago, and when I say recently, it was discovered and understood that interleukin-6, one of the cytokines that's central to creating systemic inflammatory activity, is intimately involved in the escalation of depression and even anxiety and other mood disorders that affect the brain in a way that can cause it to be less effective and efficient. So if we can take the edge off the edge off inflammatory activity, then we really mitigate the severity of most disorders, yet many disorders would require specific drugs that target specific proteins in the cells associated with inflammation that may be directly associated with the pathology of a specific disease. But in general, let me get to the generality here. In general, inflammation does play a large role in most disorders. And if we can take the edge off the inflammation with our Curcumin BDMC, we take the edge off disease and help people relieve themselves of many of the burdens associated with inflammatory disease. Now, specifics about curcumin. There are 3 curcuminoids that make up a curcumin extract of 95%. I'm going to go into that in a moment. But the key element that we discovered is that curcumin 3, and it's called bis-dimethoxycurcumin. If you look at this slide, BDMC, bis-dimethoxycurcumin, is one of the curcuminoid metabolites, also known as curcumin 3. We have curcumin 1, curcumin 2, and curcumin 3. Now, curcumin 3, in our research that's published in peer-reviewed journals, is the only one, not curcumin 1 and not curcumin 2, but curcumin 3, that can inhibit the escalation of a protein called MSK1. And MSK1 is centrally, as you'll see in these slides, associated with the development of inflammatory activity at a genomic level. So here we have a slide that actually shows you the typical proportions that exist in a curcumin extract and the root source for curcumin. So many people entwine or confuse the nomenclature or naming of turmeric, the spice, and curcumin. Turmeric is a spice we use in cooking, and turmeric does have curcumin in it, but it ranges between 2 and 4% concentration, as high as 6% at times in some plants. And so you can see with turmeric and 6% curcumin, it has other phytochemicals that are naturally existent, like turmerones, which support anti-inflammatory activity as well. But curcumin is the main anti-inflammatory agent in turmeric, but it only exists at roughly 3 to 6% concentration. And we then extract that out. And you see that in health food stores as curcumin extracted and standardized as a 95% to 97% concentrate. And that's what we all look for. But what people don't realize, and you can see it in this screen, you have curcumin 1, diferrylmethane, curcumin 2, dimethoxycurcumin, and curcumin 3, bis-dimethoxycurcumin. And you can see that bis-dimethoxycurcumin typically exists in concentrations that range between 0.2 to 3% in a curcumin extract. But what happens is, from batch to batch, these constituents will range. And you can see there's a range from 50 to 78% for curcumin 1, 10 to 20%. And what I have always thought is, hey, wait a minute. If that range creates different yields from batch to batch for each of these curcuminoids, how does that affect the final pharmacology of a curcumin extract when you get lot 1 from in September and you get lot 3 in December, and they're coming from different climates and different countries, because climate, soil, insects, they all affect how these metabolites are created by a plant. And so from lot to lot, batch to batch, because these are natural agents, they're going to vary. And so what I did was say, look, we need to know what each of these curcuminoids do at a genomic and proteomic level to be able to understand whether or not we need to be more specific about standardization. And when I say more specific about standardization, standardizing in the context of the proportion, curcumin 1, 2, and 3, so it does not shift. When we get the optimal proportion that we are affecting 2 different proteins in the cell, NF-kappa B, and as you see here, MSK1. And we don't have to go into the details of how that works, but the curcumin extract itself only typically affects NF-kappa B. And I'll go into that page in a moment. But our curcumin BDMC will inhibit 2 key proteins associated with inflammatory activity. not one. Regular curcumin inhibits one. Now, why is this important? Because our curcumin bio-BDMC is also shown, and this is a critical finding, and we're showing this now and about to publish papers on it. Curcumin bio-BDMC enhances brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And years ago, it was thought BDNF only existed in the brain, and that was where it was originally discovered, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. But it is essential to enhancing recovery, restoring metabolic activity, restoring neuroplasticity in the brain. As it declines, we start to see disease development, and usually in older people, this BDNF can decline. And in fact, BDNF levels are very low in people who have Alzheimer's or other neurological disorders that are central nervous system located. And so curcumin does cross the blood-brain barrier, but not all curcuminoids have the right proportion to induce BDNF, because it is the bis-dimethoxycurcumin component that is enhancing BDNF. And that's why our curcumin bio-BDMC, which has an elevated curcumin bis-dimethoxycurcumin in it, is affecting BDNF in a positive way. Now, the wonderful thing about BDNF is that it has been found in other parts of the body peripherally, and in those tissues has the same role. When activated, when transcription increases, we see an improved restoration, recovery, and youthful tendency for those tissues. I'll show you here as part of the research that we did that was published in the peer-reviewed journals. You can see how we have various curcuminoids that are being tested. If you look down here, you can see commercial curcumin extract, regular extract, and these are concentrated extracts that work well. They're 95, 97%, does not inhibit MSK1. Curcumin 1, whoa, does not inhibit MSK1. Curcumin 2 does not inhibit curcumin 2 does not inhibit MSK1. And well, let's go back. Oh, we got to go back here. And curcumin 3, yellow circle, inhibits MSK1. And you can see it does so both here in the nucleus and in the cytosol. So let's go outside of the details and we look at what we've got here. So we at Biologic then began to say, okay, we find these essential discoveries that get published. How do we then create traction in the public domain to help people maximize their health using the right curcuminoid concentration that is processed properly? And here we go. You can see on the left, standard curcumin, that's the typical proportion and the range you see. But you can see with BDM30, the curcumin bio-BDMC30 technology, you don't see a range. There's no range. You got 50%, you got 15% dimethoxycurcumin, and 30% bis-dimethoxycurcumin, BDMC. Why? Because BDMC, and I'll show you more in a moment in a schematic, will inhibit a second protein associated with inflammation that regular curcumin cannot inhibit. And so we have two curcuminoids now delivering two inhibition targets, and that would be for MSK and NF-kappa B. So now if you look at BDMC50, what's different about BDMC50? Well, there you got the same curcuminoids displayed, locked in again, so they do not deviate, and you have 50% bis-dimethoxycurcumin. That one is designed for professional use in the naturopathic system or in pharmacies. Why? Because it has a higher level of bis-dimethoxycurcumin, delivering a novel activity we found and discovered and then published in the peer-reviewed journals. So what makes this important? I'm going into detail here just because we've had these questions asked and they keep getting asked. So here it is. MSK1 activates NF-kappa B. What does that mean? Well, in layman, as layman as I can get, basically NF-kappa B is called a transcription factor. It goes from their cytosol of the cell into the nucleus, to the genomic, to your genes, and then what it does is it transcribes, making cytokines, as many as 150 different cytokines. What are cytokines? Cytokines are the chemicals that go out. into the body. And the process is actually quite complex. It goes to messenger RNA and then it's translated in a cytosol. Let's just go straight to the generation of cytokines. Interleukin 1. You've probably heard of TNF alpha, interleukin 2, interleukin 3, interleukin 6, interleukin 8. These are all cytokines that then become systemic and are beacons pulling the immune system towards a target. And it's quite complicated. You go into adaptive immunity where antibodies are generated. That's a different process. But the key thing is regular curcumin slows down. And you can see this depiction here. There's NF-kappa B. In short, I'm not going to go into the complexity of each of the components, but it will then dive into the nucleus and then to the gene that it needs to target and begin to create the cytokines. But MSK1 has to activate the NF-kappa B and the complex at transcription, which means NF-kappa B does its job to create these cytokines, but MSK1 activates. If you inhibit both, you get an immediate turning off of this activity to deliver a result that doesn't take 2 to 3 days that typical curcumin delivers. It takes 2 to 3 hours. And we've shown that the inflammation is an orchestration of multiple chemicals to deliver an immune response, almost 150 genes. NF-kappa B is central to that. But if we can inhibit MSK1 the way we can with BDMC30 and BDMC50, you get a much better anti-inflammatory response than just inhibiting NF-kappa B with regular curcumin. So basically what we have here is BDMC30 is set up as a over-the-counter product, and then BDMC50 is typically for professional use to deliver a result for conditions that might be more profound and difficult to deal with, having a medical professional prescribe and or monitor use of. Now, the cool thing is that there's more than just anti-inflammatory activity when it comes to the BDMC and the curcumin bio-BDMC by biologic. So that activity includes antioxidant activity that is hundreds of times more potent than regular curcumin. Why? You can see here from a constituent standpoint, bio-BDMC30 has 60 times more bis-dimethoxycurcumin, 60 times more than regular curcumin, and 1,200 times more than turmeric, the spice. Okay, bio-BDMC50 has 100 times more BDMC, bis-dimethoxycurcumin, than regular curcumin extract, and 2,000 times more BDMC than regular turmeric. And so that's where the potency comes from, delivering two factors. One is the anti-inflammatory activity on MSK1 through NF-kappa B, but two, ORAC value. And that's another very important factor, antioxidant activity, ORAC value, oxygen, radical absorption capacity, ORAC. Okay. Now, regular curcumin is somewhere around 9,000, 10,000 ORAC, where bio-BDMC30 is somewhere around 500, whereas bio-BDMC50 is even higher, because it is the bis-dimethoxycurcumin that delivers a potent hit of antioxidant activity. And the one thing you need to keep in mind is that antioxidant activity works hand in hand with anti-inflammatory activity. And expanding on that and giving you a different perspective of that, oxidation enhances or elevates inflammation. And as inflammation increases, so does oxidation. And so in order to really gain a profound neutralization of oxidation and or inflammation, you have to target both at the same time with significance. And that's what curcumin bio-BDMC does. It enhances the body's capacity to control inflammation and oxidation at the same time. And regular curcumin only inhibits, as you can see on the screen, NF-kappa B translocation so that it slows down the production of those cytokines for inflammation. Whereas curcumin bio-BDMC inhibits both NF-kappa B, and MSK1 to deliver a more profound effect on managing inflammation. This is what we call a cytokine array. And basically what we're doing is we're testing in serum various cytokines that are central to navigating inflammation. And you can see, compared even to aspirin and ibuprofen, the lower the bar, the better. How BioBDMC in the middle and BioBDMC 30 and 50 right here. You can see them there in IL-8, IL-6. Those are there. See, it's almost reduced to zero. See that? Reduced to zero. Interleukin 16 reduced to zero. TNF-alpha. Look at that. Reduced to zero. And in addition, much more profound effect than ASA and ibuprofen. You can go to all these. Interferon, much more effective than ASA and ibuprofen. Interleukin 3, interleukin 2 and interleukin 1 beta. These are critical and central to the commencement of inflammation. You can see how BDMC 30 and BDMC 50 both equally neutralize these cytokines, multiples at the same time to deliver a profound effect. You can see here in terms of knee pain and key inflammatory cytokines, NSAIDs versus typical NSAIDs versus BDMC 30, you can see here almost 15 times better for IL-1 and 12 times, we say between 13 and 14 times more effective than ASA and ibuprofen in these studies that we launched. So, what is curcumin BioBDMC used for? It's used to help manage joint pain and discomfort, inflammation in general. We know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so to enhance BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, critical for the mitigation and advancement of Alzheimer's and other cognitive disorders. What difference will I feel using BioBDMC instead of regular curcumin extract? You'll feel results more quickly, within hours, versus regular curcumin taking several days. Is curcumin BioBDMC an antioxidant? These are typical questions we're seeing. And yes, it exhibits profound antioxidant potential that's very powerful. And we also showed in the past that it does enhance a compound called NRF2, which is a transcription factor. And that also improves your cell's capacity to make endogenous or internal antioxidants like glutathione peroxidase that you've heard of, superoxide dismutase, hemoxygenase. These are antioxidants your cells make inside to protect the organelles, DNA, and the inner workings of the cell. And so here we've got, can regular curcumin inhibit the MSK1? Absolutely not, cannot. And therefore, you never get that double effect to deliver that potent anti-inflammatory activity. And there you have it. We have an amazing compound in BioBDMC. We have BDMC 30. We have BDMC 50. Both have a tremendous, significant effect in helping to manage inflammation. They have different uses. One is typically used as product in professional applications. That would be the BioBDMC 50. The other one, BioBDMC 30, is typically over the counter. This technology was a life changer for me. It allowed me to continue life as normal as possible with severe ulcerative colitis, and it's helped a lot of people live a life full of success and full of their potential. Thank you very much.